All right, so I think what the goal of the next session is really to kind of rehash some of the performance optimization tips that some new content because of the changes we did to the platform, but mostly ideas and concepts that are out there in many forms through blogs or documentation. But that will be a good discussion. And so the goal again is that we're gonna take an app that is unoptimized, and then we'll go through the exercise of step by step moving things around, setting up a variable, setting up a few things, in the app settings, and see how we can actually improve the performance. Okay, so what I have here is another conference app built on SQL. What it's showing is a set of sessions, and starting and date time and all of that stuff. So regular conference app with just details about each session, title, location, and then start and end time. So here, we can actually compare. Let's play this guy. And let's play an optimized one. All right. So on the left is the unoptimized one, and the right one is the optimized one. So we'll see how we can go from what we see on the left, and you can see it's still going on, and see why a few things that you could do within the app can boost the performance to this degree. It's still going on the side. This is the first load probably, so we'll do one more refresh just to be kind of fair. Anyway, it's gonna load eventually, but again here we'll see that few things are happening within the app. So first of all, my process personally is to kind of, the first thing I do is look at the app start. Anything here that is actually involves a network call, I actually move away from here. The reason I don't like to see network call in the app start is because it's yet another potential delay between you loading the app and then something interesting and something that the user might care about happening on the screen. So the fastest we can get to an interaction fastest we can get to a point where a user can interact with the app, the better it is. So right away, I would take this whole section here, which seems to be doing a bunch of loads here with loading a bunch of tables. So I'll take that away, and I'll move it to the unvisible of my loading screen here. So again, my goal here was just to kind of ensure that a user can actually get to this particular section pretty quickly. So here, one of the things I will actually start doing, and this is a pattern of the apps, is just kind of making sure that we have an experience where a user can see a loading screen. So that could be just a little animation mentioning loading. So I'll do show loader here. So I'll always wrap my my unvisible so that at the very least, when you get to this screen, maybe you want to actually offer the user the ability to kind of see kind of an interesting animation. We're loading your data, we're loading this or that. So let me see if I actually package it for, I don't have it here. Let's actually import the components here so we can have a loader. Upload files, so hopefully we have here. So my goal right now, is to get the user as fast as possible to my own customized experience of a preloading experience, rather than that default Power Apps animation that you see here. So the fastest we could reduce this, the better it is, so that we can have a more pleasant, in theory, experience right here. So again, I have a particular loading session here, and then we can see the data here. So going back to my experience here, I moved everything to my own visible. I wrapped it under this variable that will help me control the visibility of my preloader animation. I'm gonna go ahead and take that preloader control right here. This will look like this. This preloader has a property called isLoading, which I will now link to this showLoader variable that I'm setting at my unvisible screen. So the next thing I will start questioning, and that's kind of always, is what is the minimum, what is first of all the entities or the tables that I'm using in this first screen, because if I'm going to be loading stuff that I'm not even using, then it's kind of another missed opportunity to get the user going using the app. So here, a quick check on all of the places that might be loading. So I can look at the menu here. It looks like it's filter menu items. I know that this one is actually being just hard-coded here. So not an issue. I know that this gallery is linked to sessions. I know that if I look at the maybe the colors here, they are being linked to the session type table. So I know that this is actually looking at the venue. So venue, session, and session type are the only three entities that I'm actually looking at here. Menu items is just a hard-coded local collection. So those are the three collections that are really needed for that first screen. So this loader that's wrapping here can actually happen a little bit higher up. So we can actually bring the, so we don't need the session. We need venues because that's being used or should be used to load the venue sessions. Conference user, I know for a fact it's not using that first screen, so it can be outside. Session type can actually be used. That's going to be used, so we should get it loaded before the preloader animation happens. So again, the net result here is that a user will come to this experience. We will load the bare minimum. We can load the bare minimum that is needed to load the UI or the data needed for the UI to render. So the next thing here is that we have the ability to kind of also do things like sorry, just to kind of finish that thought. So I'm loading a bunch of things. I'm here as soon as the loader animation disappears. The user can interact with the app, but we're still gonna preload a bunch of things that are gonna be needed in the next screen. So it's kind of an optimization. Let's get started loading content that is not gonna be used right away. It doesn't matter. It's gonna be used in the next screen. It's not gonna block the user from actually interacting with the app. The only thing that's block it is that component we brought together here, the preloader. The preloader animation that we have here. So let me make sure it's on the top, and then that's it. We can keep the stuff loading on the background. This is why when we're loading here, we are able to see the screen, and then those little dots here are still going, but I am able to actually do stuff as I'm loading stuff for the experience. I think a feature request that has been, asked by customers is just even the ability to kind of show and hide this loading animation that comes with Power Apps. Okay, so the next thing is like the use of concurrent functions. So anything that's not dependent, like by default, those functions here are actually sequentials. So this API call will be done. The data coming from this table will be done before we move on to the next call. So here, what you want is really make sure, since we don't have dependency between those calls, to use the concurrent function and wrap all of those additional calls in that concurrent. That way, we trigger them in parallel, which is again. We could do this as well for these three things, but we'll see another optimization here that I'm going to do a little bit later on, which makes the concurrent not really useful there. So again, this is just so that initial call doesn't have those additional calls are actually fast as well. In some situation, if this had dependencies, if anytime you are calling collection, you should probably wrap it under concurrent call. In fact, I'll do it here, but then you'll see that once I apply another optimization, that might not even be that useful. All right, this is the concurrent call. Very useful to have. The next thing here is that we are noticing here that when they are, and this is actually a pretty good thing they've at least done here, is that they looked up the actual conference user, which is an actual user in the conference table. And they, if that is blank, they are going ahead and creating a new user that will capture things like the title, the photo, I guess not the photo in this case, but at least the last name, first name, all of the info of a user in order to have a conference user object in the table as well. So they are getting this data from Office. So here, when you're doing kind of performance optimization, you want to make sure that when you're doing things like lookup or for all or whatever formulas or filter operation, that you're not, in this case, we're doing a patch, you're not, making multiple calls to an API that's, like this. It's just kind of even from a style perspective, you could just basically simply cache this object, somewhere. So here I can actually within this statement within the current user placement, I can actually set a user or profile. Hello. So the goal here is to avoid having to make this call multiple times within. So I am simply setting up a variable here called profile, and I'm reusing it across the time where I needed that. So again, this is just a minor thing, but again, in some situation, if you're doing a lookup of especially on those Office 365 calls, you might end up doing it within a loop or making the call multiple times. So it's a good idea to first cache it into a property here and then use it later on for your operations or formulas. So the other thing that here is subject to optimization is this notion of session types and venues. So if you notice that if you have this situation where a particular collection or particular table can be static, and in this case we know that session types are unlikely to change. This is especially at like towards the end of a project or before shipping. Sometimes the styles are baked, or in this case the venue of a conference are not going to change. If there is any opportunity to kind of at the end of the day substitute a static data, a static collection with an equivalent export of an Excel table, an Excel embed file that we can embed with the solution with the app, that's a good option. So in this case, instead of going and making an API call to something that's likely gonna be static all the time and not gonna change, why don't we just substitute that by realizing that we could just simply. So here, I think I have conference static data coming here. So this is like I have even the sessions as static data. We don't have to do that, but if we know your data is static, you might even include that as a static data. So I'm gonna just do session type and static venues here. If we look at those tables, they are exactly a copy of the latest latest table that I exported into Excel. So yeah, venues are not gonna change. They always gonna have name, image, all of that address. So, again, it's an optimization that's not always possible, but many cases, if you find that one or two tables are gonna be the same, you can just simply change that by So again, we're reducing quite a bit the number of API actual calls that one person has to wait in order to get to the experience. Right now, we are only loading one table, and that's it. You are able to kind of interact with the app, and that's why we also see that drastic experience changes between the two tables, the two apps. Simply by realizing that some data can be loaded after the fact, or some data can be static, some data can be called obtained concurrently. So all of those things are things that are worth doing when we are optimizing an app. So you can see like how big is the difference between the two apps, and really the only difference is just how we are loading our data. In 99% of the cases when we're involved in optimization, it's not a back-end issue. It's not like a bottleneck on SharePoint or SQL. It's usually the way someone decided to kind of orchestrate the data loading of that particular app. All right, so that's still going. You can see how drastic the experience is between the two. So now the next thing that usually is a subject to kind of optimization is like around assets and images. So here I have a bunch of assets here that are images. Looking at these images, it's worth kind of doing again, they preloaded here pretty fast, but you want to avoid situation where a user is waiting a while for an image to load. So there is multiple things that can be done in order to do to optimize kind of loading time of pages, especially if they are rich in assets. So one of the things I first check is, so let me go again to my folder here. So here, by default, those images you can see here, it's just important to check the size of them. So many times user will upload high res images if they are not compressed. And they're not in the right, JPEG. Ideally, you might end up having to wait a while for those images to load. So you could imagine an Azure function on the fly that goes and actually compress those images and output them into a different URL. So none of that background is if it's running, but this is an example where the optimized version of this is actually the same images, the compressed images here are exactly the same images, but you could see how drastically the size is different. Quality won't suffer necessarily, especially in a tablet or phone layout. But even then, you could always start with showing first a compressed, the optimized image. So here you could add another layer on top, which will have the actual high quality image. So when the app loads, it will first load this one, the image underneath, and then once it will load fast because the optimized image is actually just a thumbnail, resolution, or even low resolution. And then if you're interested in looking at the high resolution, as soon as that loads up, that image will take precedent, will take the front. So that's when you have the ability to compress images. Obviously, you also can do a preloading experiences of the images. So when you can't really touch the image or compress them, they are maybe coming from a different source, and you want to make sure that when someone goes to the activity feed, for example, those images are loaded really, really fast. So in order to do that, you could preload them in an earlier screen, similar to the way we were preloading stuff around here. After the preloader is done, you could actually force a loading of those images by inserting a gallery control that you can link to the feed, to your photo feed. To your the same activity feed here. Again, so this is my gallery control that I just put in here. It's going to be linked to the activity feed. In fact, we need to probably link it to the actual activity feed collection that we just built. Activity feed. The activity feed is just basically a collection that's coming from the activity feed table. So it's a local collection. We'll talk about local collection in the context of performance optimization, because that might make a big difference, the size of the data, in what techniques you can use for optimization. So if you have more than 2,000 items, a lot of this putting stuff in collection is not going to fly. So we'll talk about it in a second. For now, I'm trying to optimize the preloading of images. So for that, I'm just going to add an image to this gallery. I'm going to make sure it's... so I'm going to link this image to the image, this item.image URL. So I'm going to shrink this section. I'm going to shrink this guy. Again, I can actually make sure the let's make sure. Let's put maybe a more wrap control around this. Doesn't matter really. The idea here is that I'm actually forcing these images to load because I'm having them here. I set this image to transparent. It will still force this thing to load. This whole gallery can actually stay in the background. And then if you look at the, in the back. So if you look at actually the trace for when the app load, you will see all of those images loaded at this stage. Or most of them, they will start loading depending on how fast you go to the next screen. But the process of loading these images will be forced, and the browser, the device browser, or if you're on the browser, or if you are even in the web view, I guess in the hardware in the phone device, they will be cached within the browser. So by the time you get here, those images are going to be already loaded. So sorry, I have to go back to the first screen. One of the things that was very important to mention, and I didn't. First of all, we actually preloaded stuff here. We put session, all of the session into a session collection. What we need to do is make sure that this conference specifically has less than 2,000 items, or 2,000 for this conference ID. We have less than 2,000 sessions. Otherwise, we can't really put it in a collection here, and we'll have to kind of rely on the progressive loading of a gallery to load more and more items. So typically, if you can manage to through requirement, through some initial filtering, here it makes sense to filter by conference ID. But but the hope is that we have less than 2,000 sessions. But maybe if that's not an option, there will be more than 2,000 sessions. Then I have to find another way to further filter the result set so that it's less than 2,000 items, which is the max a collection can gather for any particular API call. So one API call will bring at most 2,000 items. That you will stick to a collection. If you happen to have more than 2,000 items, you're not going to get that. Just something to keep in mind here. And the best scenario is to kind of really think from the get-go: is there any more filtering that I could apply? Maybe it's by the user or by the type of session or by the day. The day would make a lot of sense, So conference has more than 2,000 sessions, but any particular day doesn't have more than 2,000 sessions. Therefore, I can actually go ahead and put those filtered sessions by day into a local collection like this, which I should use here rather than the table. If you keep the table here, it will make an extra API call as soon as you load the app. So you don't want that. So that's sessions. Here again, we noticed that when we're looking at this, we were referring to venue. Again, you can imagine that the initial load, it was loading the session table. And then for every single row, we were loading, making an API call, which is what this will trigger, to go and search for that particular venue. So that's an N+1. That's kind of a pattern that we see that also causes a lot of performance degradation, because you are making hundreds of API calls each time you load the app, versus just exactly two calls right now. Actually, one call, because the venues now is a static is a static collection. But still, like we don't have to do a lookup for every single the way it was hooked up. Every single item here was doing an API call. So if you look at the traces, which if you look at them in the monitor here, you will see there would have been a lot of noise. All right, so we talked about asset optimization right here by actually preloading. First of all, trying to compress the image itself that is in an activity feed. You could do it server-side through an Azure function that automatically will go and see what the user uploaded, compress it, and give you access to a different URL for that, or even replace it. Or maybe preloading that. The other thing that sometimes I see happening is in the media folder here. You can see asset that might be pretty big that's being used. Like this one is 17 megabytes for an image. So those things are good to watch out for. Just basically, it will help. It will help if those assets are compressed accordingly. The other stuff that actually are more and more important is looking at the app settings. I'll talk about a few here. One of them is the explicit column selection. So the explicit column selection happens to work with CDS and SQL. And basically what it does is it looks at every single column on your table and make sure that if it's not being used in your app, it's not being downloaded from the server. So when we're looking at data here, and this is actually session information, every single column, you can see it brought back to the server, but maybe I don't need some additional columns like the capacity, maybe the description I'm not using at all in my app. So Power Apps will, when this flag is on, will intelligently look at your UI and see how it's referring to those column properties, and then make the determination of whether it needs to be, the data needs to be corresponding to that column needs to be downloaded. So it's a really great flag to have for every app that, especially if you have apps with hundreds of tables with hundreds of columns, and most of them are not used. This will actually drastically reduce the size of the data brought back to the client to Power Apps. So delayed loading is also another really important flag to have on. I think nowadays when you create an app, it's on by default. This flag is basically what allows Power Apps to kind of be a bit more, do some optimization around loading screens. So when that flag is off, every single screen that you have in an app will load at initial, when the app starts. So while in reality, you only need to load one screen at a time. In fact, if we go back to all of this stuff here, you can see here, if you look at the trace, you can see the screen name being loaded here. You can see here that we loaded quite a bit of screens at load time. And I think if you look a bit deeper, you'll see that most of the screens will have loaded if that delayed loaded it was off. So the only thing to watch, so that flag should be on so that only one screen at a time is loaded. But one has to watch out for the fact that the screens should not have dependencies. So an example of that we see sometimes is, for example, having a page of styles. Maybe you have all of the buttons here, and then here you have a default button style being perhaps referenced in some places, like here, for example, I'm using default button style. It's an UI element that exists in a different screen that I'm referencing in my home screen. So if Power Apps sees this sort of dependency, it will also load that style screen here, which is not something we wanna. It's something we wanna avoid. So make sure that when you're building UI that you don't have dependencies between UI dependencies between screens, meaning one screen doesn't refer to a UI element of another screen. Otherwise, it will defeat the purpose of that delayed load optimization. There are other flags here that are more recent. One of them is the visibility enhanced. Keep recently visited screen in memory. So this is another one that's very useful if you have rich UI in every screen and you go back and forth between the screens. It doesn't reload the entire screen. So some apps we have seen performance issues with just purely rendering the collections. Purely rendering the controls in the screen. So this is kind of an optimization that helps with that. The other one is this, if you have hidden controls, you might want to turn on that flag as well. So this visited screen in memory, keep recently visited screen is really there to tackle a rendering challenge that we have with complex apps when they have a lot of controls, like 300 control plus on one screen. Where you will start seeing some degradation or some delay in actually just purely rendering those controls, which is why control optimization is another area where you can actually kind of keep like innovative in a way. I'm going to give an example of control optimization right now, which is really about using, for example, here is a gallery control. Sorry, it's an actual Canvas app with multiple cards, each really defining the same pattern. This is an example where you know, a gallery control would have been more appropriate to do. So this is where instead of creating data cards for every single element, you would just have created a component, a gallery control. Let me duplicate this. So you can notice here how many data cards we have, how many controls within each data card we have. The equivalent is a gallery control, which is one control. And in here, you can just link it to the FAQ table. And then here with the proper layout, you could actually just, you know, achieve the exact same look and feel. So this will be title, I guess, or yeah, I guess title. And then here you could do the content again. And I would have used actually a variable height gallery for this, but again, you know, you would basically, in essence, achieve the same kind of look and feel using a gallery control. So this is a simple example, but often you will find a bit more sophisticated, you know, using the toggling of elements. You can have cards that are different in the look and feel, the layout of, you know, you might have one card with a button or a text input, but the way you would transform that into a, you know, as soon as you find a common pattern, the way you would do that in a gallery by toggling the visibility of those elements. So anyway, the bottom line is that anytime you can reduce the number of controls that you're using, like for example, use a gallery instead of buttons for if you have a menu collection, you know, use components as much as you can instead of duplicating the same components across screens. Those are all things that you should do in order to reduce the number of controls. That, you know, basically the DOM element will the DOM tree will actually have less elements. Therefore, it will be faster to render. Is around kind of this concept of optimization related to or kind of a more like an optimistic saving, I guess, optimistic approach to kind of committing data back to the server. So typical way of implementing this is you would have, you know, in this case, we're actually creating an image. So this is a user uploading a picture. So they pick that picture from any of the conferences, you know, images we have. They uploaded it to Azure storage. Then they are updating the actual table patch, you know, that goes with that table. So this is a typical of way because you just really patch in the activity feed. The drawback of actually doing it this way is that when you're actually uploading something, that you have to wait all of this time until that patch is done before it gets reflected in the UI. So that's definitely not the experience that you see in any of the modern apps that you use, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, or whatever. When you are uploading a picture, you expect it to kind of show up in your feed right away. So, you know, a pattern to use to kind of give that user that impression or that feeling that it's instantaneous reaction is by, first of all, linking this collection anyway to the actual collection, the local collection of a feed, activity feed. So again, we are working against a local copy. So again, with Power Apps, we don't have two-way binding. We don't have those concepts. We don't, we are on the hook here to kind of manage how we're going to do this. So it's a little bit of mechanics. But rather than actually, I'm going to copy paste just for the speeding of this stuff. Or I guess I won't. I guess what I can do is actually patch that same local collection first, rather than being the activity feed here. I could just do activity feed. Rather than using this uploaded picture from the image URL here, I'm going to use the image URL will be whatever I used here, which is the addmedia.pedia. So that way, that first patch that happened is actually a local patch. So basically, it will be instantaneous. Then the user can go on with their life. They will see this reflected in their collection. This will happen behind the scene. Obviously, you want to do some error, management here, or error handling, so that in case the actual patching of the database doesn't work, we can talk about error handling in a little bit. But the bottom line is that the net effect of something like that is that the user will see that local collection change first. And then we, behind the scene, will also be patching the actual server location. Let's see if it's going to be any difference here. You can see that the patching happened after the fact. I saw right away an interaction happen in my screen. I covered a bunch of things here, from image optimization to rearranging where you want to load data. I think this is the most important optimization, is just realizing that we have to kind of maximize or minimize the number of calls at load time, delay any loading to later on after the preloading animation. Asset will make a difference. Reducing the control size is going to make a difference, but really what API calls we make at the initial screen is what's going to matter the most. And often, if you are in a situation where you don't have the luxury, you have to deal with many entities or tables, and you have no choice, you have to load them first. That's where you're gonna start having difficulty optimizing further, unless you start using, if you're in SQL, views, for example, or or backends like a proper web layer that returns you a already shaped response.